Hello, welcome to Africa Business Channel TV. My name is Collie Brown. In today's show, we're going to be talking about how the African mindset affects African businesses. So before we get into this, let me talk about the word mindset, because most of the time you hear the word mindset, you think it's a negative word. But mindset is actually a neutral word. And what is the definition of mindset? The definition of mindset is a set of beliefs or attitudes held by an individual. So a mindset can be very positive or very negative. If those attitudes are positive, then it's positive. So the attitudes is what that are held is what makes it either positive or negative. And we're talking about a set of mindset that is held by a large number of people in Africa and how that particular mindset affects African businesses. In this scenario, we're going to be talking about chickens. We're going to use the chicken business to illustrate what I mean by this mindset. But let me talk a little bit about the chicken business. The story I will tell you, or the account I will give you about the individuals involved, they are real. These are real people, real story, real incident. I have changed the name. In fact, I'm not going to say the name of the country because this applies to almost every country in Africa. I don't want you to focus on one country thinking only one country has this problem. It's all over. Okay, so let's talk about the chicken business. So in this particular country, in order to break even in the chicken business, if you're in the chicken business, you have to sell at least 10 chicks on a market day. For those of you who do not know what break even is, it means the amount of money going out and coming in is exactly the same. In other words, you're not making any profit, but you're not losing. In this story, it involves outsiders. So let me describe to you the outsiders. The outsiders are not Africans. They're not from Africa. They're from a very, very distant land. But when they come to Africa, people assume they have a lot of money. It's just an assumption. You know, when Africans see outsiders, they assume outsiders have money, but that's not true. These people are coming to Africa with very little money. Most of the money they're going to use to build their business, they're going to earn in Africa. Of course, there are the local people who sell chickens in this market, and they number in the hundreds. Also, the market opens up at 10 o'clock. That's when you have to buy your chicken at 10 o'clock, and you can buy chicken throughout the day until very late in the evening. So these outsiders, when they came to Africa, they come with the idea that they're going to create wealth for themselves. The one thing they have going for them is that they believe somehow with their ingenuity, they will be able to create wealth, and they will do whatever it takes to create wealth. That's the same attitude Africans have when they cross the Mediterranean and go to Europe. They know they're going to have to work hard. They know the conditions and the life they're going to be living is going to be really, really rough, but they are prepared to do it so that they can send back whatever they can send back to families back home in Africa. So that mindset is not unique to the outsiders. Africans have it, but they tend to have it when they go outside of Africa. But in any case, these outsiders come and they look around and they say, well, what business can we get into to make some money? And they saw the chicken business. If you know anything about the chicken business, you realize it is not a very difficult industry to get into. So they come and they ask the local people, where did you get your chickens? Where you buy the little young chicks? And they said, well, we bought it from a particular place up the road. And so these people now would go and they bought their 20 chickens like everybody else. And they start to raise their 20 chickens. And as the chickens mature around 4 pounds, they take them to the market and start selling like everybody else. One day, the outsiders asked themselves, what if we show up at 9 o'clock and bring our chicken to the market and start selling at 9 o'clock? What would happen? So the group of them, next chicken market showed up at 9 o'clock. And lo and behold, when they show up at 9 o'clock, there were people prepared to buy chickens at 9 o'clock. You see, it turns out that people wanted to buy chicken before 10 o'clock when the market's open. But because the market wasn't open, they had to leave the market, go do what they're going to have to do, and then come back later on in the day and purchase the chicken. So what happens now is that because these people are showing up at 9 o'clock, the people who want chicken at 9 o'clock or who would love to buy chicken at 9 o'clock were buying chickens. So what happens now is that the people who are selling chickens at 9, which is the outsiders, so they start to sell more chickens than the locals. Now, that went on for some time. And there were a few local people who were smart. They caught wind of the situation and realized, wait a second, these guys are coming in before us and getting a market to themselves. We are going to show up. But that number was very, very small. Of the hundreds that actually show up to sell chickens, only a small handful of people decide they're going to show up at 9 o'clock, just like the other people, just like the outsiders. And lo and behold, when they show up, they start to sell more chickens. But guess what? The chickens come at the expense of the people who start to sell at 10. And so the people who were selling at 10 starts to lose, instead of selling, 15 chickens, they're now selling 12 chickens or 11 chickens. And remember, you need 10 to break even. So what do you think the outsiders did? They asked themselves the question again, hey, what if we show up at 8? Would there be somebody to buy chickens at 8? Let's try it. And sure enough, they showed up at 8. There were people who are willing to buy chicken or were ready to buy chicken at 8. Those people who moved at 9, a small group of those people again said, look, if they're going to go 8, we're coming 8. But quite a few remained selling at 9. And so the people who moved, the local people who moved at 8, are now competing head to head. But what, as you can see, and you could probably determine now over time, that the early group is distinguishing themselves because they're selling 20 chickens, 25, 30 chickens now, as opposed to the people who are coming in at 10 who are selling only 10 chickens, 11 chickens. So when they moved to 8, it made it so that some of the people who were selling chickens and could sell 10 and 11 before are now only selling 9 or 8 chickens. You need 10 chickens to break even. So they could no longer compete. They would continue to sell, but as they sell, they lost money, and eventually it drove them out of business. So the market started to consolidate into the hands of the outsiders and the few locals who were smart enough to jump on the bandwagon. So between the 9 and 8 people, they cornered the market. In addition to that, because they were now selling so many chickens, the early people, they could buy their chickens at a deeper discount, which means their profit margins were bigger. So they could then turn around and sell their chickens at a lower price and still make a profit. So that in itself also drove the local people who stayed at 10 out of the market. So the people who were selling chicken at 10 started to lose money. That happens because the local people mindset was, we are not going to change. Not all of them, but a significant chunk of them refused to change. They said, we're not going to come at 9, we're not going to come at 8, we're going to come at 10. That's our tradition. This is how we do things here. And that is what we're going to do. And that has cost them their business. But it didn't end there. Now that the local people could no longer sell chickens, where are they going to get sustenance from? Where are they going to get money to send their kids to school and to pay for the bills? So they reach out to their relative now over in the United Kingdom. And they say to these relatives over there, we need you to help us financially because the chicken business is out. We no longer can do the chicken business. We don't have any money. Now, these people who are overseas, these relatives, don't have a big profession so that they can easily spend, 200, 300, 400 pounds and send that home every month. Most of these people have very little education, so they have to work an extra job. So what is happening now is that one of the relatives have a 10-year-old child, but because this relative now has to go to a job at 2 a.m. in the morning and come back home after the child is supposed to go to school, the child now has to wake up on their own, make breakfast, and then walk to school on their own. In other words, the people back home who refuse to change, they are making demands now on their relatives overseas. And it's forcing the relatives now to make the sacrifices that they refuse to make back home. But they're not telling the relatives overseas that is what has happened. They're just telling them that the business is no longer profitable. Outsiders came in and took over the business. They're not giving them the straight story. And it's that aspect of this that I want to talk about. There is a mindset by Africans on the continent that if you are a relative who goes overseas, they have it made once they go to the United Kingdom, the United States, Canada, and so forth. They have it made. And they make demands of these relatives overseas to say, send money back. But they don't know how hard these families have to work, the sacrifices that they make, the 2, the 3 jobs they have to work to earn the money necessary to send back home. And they are unwilling to adapt and to change to preserve their chicken market. So the long of it is that the outsiders and a few locals corner the market, and the vast majority of the hundreds of people who used to sell chickens can no longer afford to sell chickens. Now, word out is that these outsiders came in with a lot of money. The outsiders didn't come in with a lot of money. What they came in is with a mindset that they were going to do whatever it takes. If they have to get up at 9, they're going to get up at 9. If they have to get up at 8, they're going to have to get up at 8. And if they had to get up at 7, they would have gotten up at 7. It's the same mindset that Africans in the United Kingdom have to earn that extra money to send back home. Because when you have to get up at 2 a.m. and leave your child home by him or herself to go get that extra job so you can earn the money so you can send that back home, they are asking you to have a hunter mindset, to have a strong work ethic. But they themselves are not willing to do that back home. Remember, these outsiders that came in, they didn't come in with a lot of money, contrary to what most people think. What they come in with is a very, very, very powerful mindset, and that is we're going to do whatever is necessary, however hard we have to work to make a living, because we can go back home and tell people we come to Africa with all its resources. We haven't created the wealth that everybody over in those countries are hearing that you can go to Africa and create. It's the same reason why you will see, for example, when African immigrants go into other countries, they tend to work harder than the people locally, and that creates friction. No matter what country it is, it creates friction because they're willing to do things that the local people are not. They're willing to buck traditions that local people are not. And it's the same thing that in this particular country. The hunter mindset that you will do what it takes is not there. And that is devastating on African business. And it allows outsiders to come in and outcompete. In this video, I wanted to draw everybody's attention to the mindset. It is the reason why many African businesses don't thrive. Those of you who still think there is other things beyond that. If you are a plumber and you come from the outside and you go to, let's say, any country in Africa, and you keep your time frame. In other words, if somebody says to you, come to my house at 10 o'clock, I want you to work on my bathroom, and you show up at 10, and you consistently do that, you will drive every local plumber out of the market. Why? Because of your dedication, your hard work, and your mindset and discipline. If you ask the average African plumber to show up at 10 o'clock, good luck with that. Less than 20% will show up at 10. And over 40% will not show up at all. They might show up a day late, and they will tell you 16 million reasons why they couldn't come. So and so, this happened, that happened, and everything else happened. When I was a young boy, my mom used to have this expression. I don't know where she got it from, but I'm sure it's much older than her. The early bird catches the worm, and she would tell us that day in, day out. The early bird catches the worm. And that is true in Africa. If you are willing to have the mindset that you're going to do what it takes to compete, you will thrive. You will outcompete the people around you. And you will go toe to toe with outsiders that people say have a lot of money. Because if you notice in the example we have, some local people were selling at 8 as well. So it's not that Africans can't do it. Some did, but the vast majority stayed at 10 and end up losing the whole business. Africans, we have to change our mindset to one of competition, one of adaptation, one to do what is necessary. Traditions are great, but if traditions are going to come against your economic livelihood, traditions have to stay off to the side. You have to be willing and ready to outcompete. And you certainly cannot expect your relatives overseas to do for you by getting up at early in the morning to go to these jobs to send you money what you are not willing to do for yourselves back home. And for those of you who think African relatives overseas have it made, and then they tell you that they don't have it, you think they're being mean, you better change that attitude, because many of them are working 2, 3 jobs just to put food on their table and to send you a few dollars. Appreciate what they're doing. Appreciate their sacrifice. And those of you who are home, be prepared and put the right mindset on to compete so that your small African business can thrive. Thank you for watching.